I was Daniel Carter's junior in college for 3 years and his personal secretary for 4. Every single morning for 7 years, I sent him a punctual, good morning message like clockwork. He never once replied. Not even a thumbs up dot. I don't know when it started feeling humiliating instead of romantic, but one day I just got tired. Tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of being invisible to the man I admired the most. So I resigned. He glanced up at me, nodded indifferently, and said, okay, like I was just an item on his agenda. When I handed things over to the new secretary, he didn't even blink. That was the end of that. I changed my number, moved to another city, and started dating Ryan, me sweet, considerate boyfriend who made me feel seen for once. Things were quiet for a while, until the day Ryan hugged me from behind, kissed my cheek, and casually told me to call his uncle, Uncle Daniel, when we visited his parents. At first, I just laughed it off until I stepped into that upscale restaurant for the Carter family dinner and locked eyes with the very man I had run away from 3 years ago. Yup. That Daniel. The Daniel Carter. The one I used to call Mr. Carter, the one I used to send coffee to with 2 sugars and no cream, the one whose meeting notes I memorized better than my own name. Turns out, he was Ryan's uncle. And not just any uncle, was the heir to the entire Carter estate, the successor of the old house, the one everyone in the family listened to. And now he was the man I was supposed to call uncle. The irony could choke me. When Ryan first told me about the dinner, I didn't think much of it. He said his uncle was an introverted man who rarely attended family events, but for some reason, he agreed to this one. It's a good sign, Ryan said. If Uncle Daniel approves of you, my parents will follow. I just smiled and nodded like everything was fine. But I was already spiraling inside. I thought Ryan was just a normal rich guy, not the heir to an empire with Daniel freaking Carter as his uncle. But I wasn't marrying Ryan for money or power. I was doing it to honor my grandmother's wish. I thought that was enough. Until Daniel showed up. Until I saw him again. When we entered the private dining room, Daniel stood to greet us. He said to Ryan, "Congratulations. Starting a family is a big step. I'm happy for you." But when his gaze slid to me, he froze. He didn't say anything else. Just sat back down, his face unreadable. My entire body stiffened. I hadn't seen him in 3 years, but it felt like my soul recognized him before my brain did. He hadn't changed, still immaculate in his tailored suit, still the same calm and distant aura that made him impossible to read. I couldn't say a word. I didn't even breathe properly. I never thought Uncle Daniel and Mr. Carter could be the same person. Different cities, different circles, it didn't even cross my mind. But there he was, the man I loved in silence for years, now sitting across from me as my boyfriend's family. I thought I had let him go, but in that moment, everything I buried came surging back. And yet, he never even looked at me again. He sat there like I was invisible, just like before. Just like when I handed him my resignation. Cold. Distant. Indifferent. Ryan leaned in and proudly said, "Uncle, isn't my girlfriend pretty?" Daniel frowned just barely. Most people wouldn't notice, but after 4 years as his secretary, I did. He hated being dragged into conversations about women's looks. So I expected silence. But then he surprised me. "She looks good," he said with a faint smile. My heart clenched so hard I thought it might physically crack. Ryan beamed and wrapped his arm around my waist. "She's the one I want to marry." "Right, Mom? Dad?" His parents nodded eagerly. "As long as Uncle Daniel approves, we're all in." My throat tightened. I forced myself to say it. "Little uncle." Daniel's lips tensed. His eyes darkened. The smile vanished. He raised his glass and toasted Ryan's parents without acknowledging me. The others laughed it off, pretending it was nothing, but I knew better. He was angry. He didn't approve. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because in his eyes I had betrayed him. I had been his right hand, his confidant, and then one day, I just left. No warning. No explanation. Just gone. And now I was marrying his nephew. I could see the judgment in his eyes, How dare you? But he never understood. He never saw what it cost me to stay. To spend every day by his side, loving him, knowing he would never love me back. He thought I gave up on him. But I had to give up on myself first. That's what he never understood. When the dinner ended, Ryan's parents respectfully walked Daniel to the door. He paused, looked back, and said to Ryan, "Your girlfriend is great. Just marry her and live a good life." Still, he didn't look at me. He left without a backward glance. 2 days later, Ryan invited me shopping but bailed last minute. "Uncle Daniel wants to talk to you," he said. "Wait for me, I'll be back soon." I said okay and didn't think much of it until I turned around and saw Daniel leaning against a wall in a charcoal gray suit that made him look like he walked out of a magazine spread. "We're getting married," he said, voice calm as ever. "I came to help you pick a few things." My throat went dry. He used to do this: show up when I needed something, give me gifts without emotion. He handled my apartment lease, my health insurance, even the RSVP list for my college reunion. He knew every detail of my life. But it was never romantic. It was always professional. He took care of me like an executive takes care of company assets. And the more he gave, the more it broke me. Because I realized I didn't want his help. I wanted his heart. And he never gave me that. He only ever said, "If you want to stay by my side, you need to know your place." Back then, I obeyed. Now, I just followed him into luxury boutiques while he picked out designer gowns and custom jewelry, all without asking me once what I liked. I followed like a ghost, watching a man buy me things as if it were his duty. As if I was still his secretary. When we got into the car, he tapped the steering wheel thoughtfully and asked, "You really quit just to get married?" I looked away. "I'm old enough," I said. He said nothing. The silence was unbearable. After a long pause, he murmured, "You should have told me. I would have found someone better for you. Someone worthy." That stung. He still didn't get it. I didn't want someone better. I wanted him. But he kept talking. "Forget it. As long as you're happy. I've transferred you a few properties and cars as your dowry. Just take them." I turned to him, eyes stinging. "That's not necessary, Mr. Carter. We were just employer and employee. It's inappropriate." He frowned. No one ever said no to Daniel Carter. But I did. And it made him furious. He said nothing else, just drove me home in silence. At the curb, he handed me a card. "There's $2 million in here. You didn't collect your bonuses before leaving." I knew he was lying. My bonus was never that high. This was hush money. Or guilt. Or both. I snapped. I threw the bag and the card on the ground. "Daniel Carter, can't you see why I left? Do you seriously not understand? It's because I loved you. What do you mean with all this? Do you think this fixes anything?" He stood frozen, then slowly said, "If you don't want it, forget it. I just wanted you to know there's no future between us. I wish you a happy wedding." He left, just like that. Not another word. No looking back. No regret. I told myself that was the last time I'd ever see him. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. After that day, Daniel Carter never showed up again. He vanished as if our last confrontation never happened, like the words I shouted at him were swept under some rug of his immaculate control. Meanwhile, wedding planning marched on relentlessly. Ryan's parents and mine began coordinating everything: the engagement party, the guest list, the banquet hall, the wedding dress. My grandmother beamed with satisfaction, finally seeing her orphan granddaughter settled. My aunt was even happier, because being part of the Carter family came with all kinds of perks. Only I moved through it all like a ghost. I went with Ryan to pick out the engagement venue, chose invitations, tried on dresses. The moment I finally selected a simple satin gown, the kind I thought would feel timeless and soft, I turned around and swore I saw a tall figure I knew too well. My heart jumped, but when I blinked again, it was just some assistant adjusting the veil. Hallucinations, I thought. But Ryan had his own concerns. My uncle refused to come to the engagement party, he said with a small frown. He said he's busy, but he's always busy. I wanted you two to reconcile. I said nothing. There was no reconciliation to be had. Daniel had made his stance crystal clear. And so had I. Except the world had other plans. A few days later, Ryan took me to secure the booking at the most prestigious hotel in the city, but we were told the venue was fully reserved for months. Ryan was visibly frustrated. I should have booked earlier, he muttered. But just as we turned to leave, Daniel appeared in the lobby. He was speaking to the hotel manager. When he saw us, he paused, nodded at Ryan, didn't even glance at me, then quietly turned back. Minutes later, the manager rushed over to us and said the venue was suddenly available. Just like that. No one questioned it. Daniel didn't speak to me, didn't acknowledge my presence. But when he turned to leave, he said, "Congratulations. Happy wedding, Ryan." His voice was calm, his eyes unreadable, his posture impeccable as always. I stood there feeling like a complete fool, like someone who'd been handed a knife, but chose to smile and say thank you. On the day of our engagement banquet, members of the Carter family started arriving in droves. The chatter buzzed with rumors. Daniel Carter had left town for work, and there was no way he'd show up. I didn't expect him to. But just before the ceremony started, he walked in. Black suit, perfectly pressed, face blank like he was attending a business conference instead of his nephew's engagement. His arrival sucked the air out of the room. People whispered and shifted awkwardly, but Daniel barely acknowledged anyone. Not me. Not Ryan. Not even his own parents. He stood in a corner like a cold statue until the MC called us on stage. I stood beside Ryan under the soft spotlight, listening to the generic introduction, the congratulations, the dry humor meant to fill the air. The MC turned to Ryan and asked, "Do you take Claire Bennett as your fiancé?" Ryan smiled brightly and said, "I do." Then it was my turn. "Do you take Ryan Carter to be your fiancé?" the MC asked. My throat dried. My eyes scanned the crowd and landed inevitably on Daniel. He sat motionless, his gaze fixed on Ryan, never once flickering toward me. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a twitch, maybe a frown, maybe a look of regret. Anything. But there was nothing. Just a calm indifference that sliced sharper than rage. I sighed. I was greedy. I always had been. I wanted him to care. I wanted him to fight for me. But he never would. That wasn't who he was. And that wasn't who I could keep loving. Just as I opened my mouth to say "I do," my phone rang. Loud, sharp, twice. I tried to silence it, but it rang again. Embarrassed, I answered it quietly, turning away from the mic. On the other end, a cold, familiar voice spoke, "Claire." My heart stopped. "Don't marry him." I didn't say anything. My fingers curled tightly around the phone. "Come back," Daniel said. "Come back and be my secretary. I'll give you the best investment team, the best future. You deserve that." My chest felt like it had plunged into ice water. So that was it. Even now, he wanted me back, but not as his partner, not as his lover. Just as his secretary. "Claire," he added, "I know you don't love Ryan. This life is long. You'll meet someone who truly belongs to you. Don't settle." I laughed bitterly. He still didn't get it. I didn't want a future he created. I didn't want boardrooms and bonuses. I wanted someone who would love me simply, fully, without contracts or expectations. I wanted to paint, to dance, to be myself. But Daniel Carter only knew how to give power, not love. The MC repeated the question. "Claire Bennett, do you take Ryan Carter to be your fiancé?" I looked Ryan in the eyes. He was waiting. Smiling. Completely unaware. "I do," I said, loud and clear. In the Maybach parked outside, Daniel crushed his phone in his hand. The glass cracked. His knuckles turned white. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. But that one moment, the silence that followed, said everything. Days passed. Ryan and I planned the wedding, attended fittings, met with planners. We were a well-oiled machine. A picture-perfect couple. I tried to be present, but inside, I was falling apart. Then one day, while trying on wedding shoes, Ryan answered a call and turned to me, grinning. "My uncle's engaged too," he said excitedly. Finally. I wonder who she is. No one expected this. My heart sank. I knew I shouldn't care, but it felt like a slap. I asked him casually, "Who's the girl?" He shrugged. "Some eldest daughter of the Blake family. You know, old money." My lips pressed into a line. Daniel always knew who he was supposed to marry. And now he had. Just like that. I didn't expect to cry, but I did. Later that day, I accidentally tripped in the boutique. A strong hand caught me. "Careful," Daniel said. I froze. Of course it was him. Of all people, of all moments. He turned to Ryan and snapped, "You're with your fiancé. Be present." Ryan stammered an apology and then asked curiously, "Uncle, is it true? You're engaged?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. Vanessa Blake. It's been arranged since we were kids." Then he added, as if it meant something, "She's just who I was meant to marry." Ryan laughed. "Glad I got to choose my own." He smiled at me. I forced a smile back. But Daniel's eyes didn't leave me. On the ride home, Ryan's car broke down and Daniel offered to drive me. I didn't want to go with him, but he didn't ask. He just opened the door. We rode in silence. When I got out, he followed. "Why won't you come back?" he asked. "Why marry someone you don't love?" I turned sharply. "Because the person I love is you, Daniel Carter. And that's the cruelest part, isn't it?" He blinked. Like he didn't see it coming. "Claire, people don't only love once in their lives. You'll find someone else." I cut him off. "Do you love your fiancé?" He paused, then answered, "It's different. I'm the Carter heir. This is how it's supposed to be." His words were perfect. His posture was flawless. His life, his rules. I had once loved that about him, his stability, his certainty. But now I saw how little space that left for anything real. He looked at me, almost pleading. "Come back. Be my secretary again. I'll give you anything you want. Except love," I said quietly. His breath caught. I stepped back. "You have your reasons. I have mine. We're nothing to each other now. Don't interfere in my life again." I walked away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. A few days later, Ryan invited me to a party. "It's for Vanessa Blake," he said casually, and I just assumed she was a family friend or some socialite he'd grown up with. I didn't think much of it. The Carters and the Blakes had been old money allies for generations, so naturally there were parties, brunches, and galas between them. But what Ryan failed to mention or deliberately didn't say was that Vanessa Blake wasn't just any socialite. She was Daniel's fiancée. The woman he was supposedly marrying in the name of duty. I didn't know until we arrived. And by then, it was too late to back out. The venue was luxurious, overflowing with silk gowns, polished shoes, and champagne that tasted like power. Vanessa wore a designer dress that probably cost more than my apartment, her makeup flawless, her every movement the definition of grace. She greeted me politely, even warmly, with an elegant nod that carried the weight of someone who always knew she was first place. I returned her smile, polite and distant. Ryan, oblivious to the undercurrent, held my hand and beamed. "You didn't know?" As soon as I told Uncle Daniel we were coming, he changed his mind and said yes to the invite. My heart stuttered. He came because of me. I scanned the room and spotted him sitting near the edge of the lounge area, one leg crossed over the other, holding a glass of red wine and saying absolutely nothing. Daniel Carter didn't need to speak to command the room. His silence was louder than the music. I followed Ryan around as he introduced me to friends and distant relatives, all while trying to ignore the burning sensation of Daniel's presence across the space. But of course, it didn't stay quiet for long. Someone decided to start a party game, classic truth or dare, except with socialite rules. More wine, more pressure, more scandal. When it was Vanessa's turn, she drew a dare that made the whole crowd light up. "Kiss your fiancé," someone yelled. People laughed, clapped, chanted, and I knew Daniel would hate it. He hated public affection. He hated being touched when it wasn't on his terms. I braced myself for him to decline with his usual cool detachment. But then he did something I never expected. He stood up, walked calmly to Vanessa, wrapped one hand around her waist, the other around the back of her neck, and kissed her. Lightly at first, but she leaned in and deepened it. And he let her. My lungs forgot how to work. My body froze. And then looked at me. Right over her shoulder, his eyes locked onto mine as if asking me, "Are you watching?" My heart screamed yes, but my lips smiled like none of it mattered. I clapped with everyone else, said, like a well-trained guest, and nodded like I approved. Maybe that was the moment I stopped hoping. Fireworks started outside on the terrace. Ryan tugged me by the hand and led me to watch them. I tilted my head toward the sky, but I didn't see colors, I just felt hollow. Daniel stood near the back, drink refilled, staring at me again, but this time I didn't meet his gaze. I couldn't. I wouldn't. The party resumed. Next dare went to Ryan. The card said, "Kiss a girl in the room." The crowd screamed. Ryan turned to me, stars in his eyes, boyishly excited. "Claire, is it okay?" I nodded with a forced smile. It wasn't okay. None of this was okay. But I didn't want to embarrass him. I stood there, eyes fluttered shut, waiting for his kiss to land. Then smash. A wine glass shattered on the floor. Everyone jumped. All heads turned to Daniel. He didn't even flinch. "Sorry," he said coldly. My hand slipped. "This game is getting boring. Let's move on." His tone left no room for argument. No one dared say otherwise. The room's mood shifted instantly. Ryan chuckled nervously. "Bummer," he said, disappointed. And that did something to me. He looked so innocent, so sweet. And for a split second, I didn't want him to feel second best. So I tiptoed, leaned forward, and kissed him lightly on the cheek. "There," I whispered, "now it's complete." Just as I pulled away, the sound of something heavy crashing echoed across the room. Daniel had knocked over the entire wine table. I bumped into it, he muttered with a dismissive wave. Everyone laughed uncomfortably. But I knew better. I didn't look at him. I refused to. The party eventually died down. People left in groups. Ryan got drunk and needed help to the car, so I walked him outside and buckled him in. But I realized I'd left my phone in the hall and had to run back. When I entered the now empty venue, Daniel was the only one left. He was standing by the bar, rinsing his mouth with vintage wine. Not drinking, just rinsing, like he was trying to wash away the taste of something bitter. I grabbed my phone and tried to leave unnoticed, but he caught me. "Claire." I froze. "Come here." I didn't move. "Claire." I turned around. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed my wrist, pulling me into the stairwell. He pressed me gently but firmly against the wall, his body shadowing mine, his breath scented faintly of red wine and something else, desperation. "You can't go back to him," he said, eyes blazing. "I won't let you marry someone you don't love." I shoved him back, chest heaving. "This isn't your decision." "It is," he growled. "You think this has nothing to do with me?" "It has everything to do with me." "What do you want from me?" I shouted. "You won't marry me. You won't love me. What am I to you? A backup plan? A mistress? Some project you think you can control?" He didn't answer. Just stared, unblinking, as if he was seeing me for the first time. I slapped him. Hard. The echo bounced off the concrete walls. "You're shameless, Daniel Carter," I whispered. "I used to imagine what it would be like for you to finally see me, to love me, to choose me. And now that you door pretend to, it just feels sad." I ran out of there, barefoot, my heels broken, my makeup smeared, mascara streaking down my cheeks like war paint. I didn't look back. I walked home in silence, shaking, humiliated, but strangely clear-headed. For the first time, I realized I wasn't sad because he didn't love me. I was sad because I had let myself believe he ever could. I spent that night crying until I couldn't anymore. Then I made my decision. I wasn't going to marry Ryan. Not because I wanted Daniel, but because I wanted myself. My dreams. My freedom. I called Ryan the next evening and asked to meet. We sat at our usual lakeside bench. The summer wind was soft, almost apologetic. I looked at him and said, "Ryan, I'm sorry. I can't marry you. He smiled faintly. It's okay. I know it's about my uncle. He's been bothering you. I shook my head. No, it's not that. Ryan, you've been wonderful. You're kind and thoughtful, and I used to think I liked you. Used to, he echoed. I nodded. But I don't anymore. And the more perfect you are, the guiltier I feel. You deserve someone who chooses you every day. I can't be that person. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, do you still love him? I hesitated. No, I don't think I do. I looked him in the eye. But I don't love you either. Not the way I should. I want to be free. I want to dance. I want to paint. I want to be me again. Ryan looked down at the water, then back at me, his voice low but steady. Okay, then let's call off the engagement. Just promise me you'll be happy. My throat tightened. I'll try. That night, I went home and told my grandmother everything. I braced myself for disappointment, but instead, she just hugged me. I only pushed you toward marriage because I was afraid you'd be alone. But I see now we were never truly happy. Go live the life you want, Claire. I cried again. This time not from sadness, but from relief. The next morning, I sold everything me luxury apartment, the cars, the jewelry Daniel had given me. I deleted his number, blocked his email, and packed a single suitcase. I was ready to leave it all behind. But Daniel Carter wasn't done yet. Not even close. I thought I had finally escaped him, but Daniel Carter has always been the kind of man who never accepts losing, not in the boardroom, not in love, and certainly not when it came to control. So when I returned to my hometown to start over, I should have known he wouldn't just let me go. I should have known that the moment I sold everything and quietly slipped out of the city, cutting ties, burning bridges, and refusing every one of his assistants' attempts to reach me, it would only be a matter of time before he found me. And sure enough, one morning, while I was still unpacking my paint supplies in the spare bedroom I had converted into a mini studio, there was a knock at the door, and there he was, standing on my grandmother's front porch like a ghost from my past, dressed in a simple black coat, hair slightly disheveled like he hadn't slept, and that same infuriatingly calm look on his face. But his voice was tight with frustration when he pushed the door open and snapped, Claire Bennett, you are really good at running away, and I didn't even flinch. I just folded my arms and looked at him like I'd look at someone who no longer had power over me, because honestly, he didn't. Not anymore. Daniel, I said quietly. I'm not hiding. I just don't want to be found by you. And something in his jaw twitched before he reached for my wrist and held it tightly, his fingers warm and desperate. Claire, I like you. I've always liked you. I was just too stupid to realize it. Until it was too late. Can we start over, please? But I didn't recoil, didn't cry, didn't fall into his arms like I might have done years ago. I simply asked him the one question that still burned in my mind. What about Vanessa Blake? And he didn't even blink when he replied. It was arranged, but I canceled it. I told the family, I don't care about legacy anymore. I care about you. And for a split second, I actually believed him, but then reality set in and I took a step back. So now you're okay with disappointing your family, walking away from your inheritance, and ruining a girl's life just to chase me down here because you finally figured out your feelings. And when he didn't answer right away, I pushed again. What exactly do you expect me to say? Daniel? That I'll drop everything and go back to being your secretary with benefits? That I'll sit quietly while you untangle your perfect life and remember how to be a real human being? And he frowned, clearly not used to being challenged like this. No, that's not what I want anymore. I want us to be together, not as boss and assistant, but as equals. And I almost laughed because that word equals coming out of his mouth sounded so ridiculous after everything he put me through. So I looked him dead in the eye and said the one truth I never imagined I'd say to his face. Daniel Carter, I don't love you anymore. And just like that, all the color drained from his face. He blinked like I had slapped him, and for once, he had nothing to say. I know you don't believe me, I continued. But I'm not trying to hurt you. I just don't feel anything anymore. Not the way I used to, and I'm finally okay with that. And he shook his head slowly, almost dazed. No, you're just angry. You're just saying that because you're hurt. But I smiled gently. Because I wasn't angry, I wasn't even sad. I was just done. Daniel, do you know how long I loved you? 7 years. I sent you good morning messages every single day for 7 years, and you never replied once. Not even a period, not even a reaction emoji. And I stayed by your side through meetings, crises, investor meltdowns, and holidays you didn't even notice I worked through, because I loved you and thought maybe one day you'd see me, but you never did. Not until I walked away, and his throat moved like he was trying to swallow something sharp. I didn't realize how much you meant to me until you left, he murmured, and I nodded. Exactly, you only cared when you lost control, not when I gave you everything. And then he tried one last time, voice shaking now. Come back with me, Claire, this time. I'll give you everything, not just a job, not just apartments or cars. I'll give you all of me. And something about the way he said it so vulnerable, so raw, almost cracked something inside me, but I held firm. I don't need everything, Daniel. I just want peace, and I finally found it without you. And then I stepped back, slowly closing the door on the only man I had ever truly loved, because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about closure. It was about choosing myself for the first time in years. And as I leaned against the door frame and heard the sound of his car pulling away, I didn't cry. I breathed deeply, freely, and when my grandmother came in and saw me smiling through watery eyes, she just hugged me without asking anything, because somehow she already knew. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself, like maybe I wasn't the girl chasing love anymore. Maybe I was the woman choosing herself. And a few weeks later, when I received an offer from a regional dance troupe to become their lead choreographer, I didn't hesitate. I packed up my things and moved to a city where no one knew me as Daniel Carter's secretary or Ryan Carter's ex-fiancé, where I could build something of my own. And in the following 2 years, I didn't just survive. I bloomed, winning awards, performing on national stages, painting in my spare time, finally living a life that felt like mine. And when I walked through the theater halls, people called me Miss Bennett with admiration instead of pity. And I never looked back until one day, the company director told me I was getting an assistant and sent in the paperwork, and I, distracted, barely read it before signing, until the day the assistant actually showed up, and I froze. Because standing in front of me, dressed in a basic black tee and slacks, was Daniel Carter, hair slightly longer, eyes still piercing, and a shy smile playing on his lips as he said, "Hello, Miss Bennett. I'm your new assistant. Please take care of me." And I wanted to scream, to laugh, to cry. But all I did was narrow my eyes and turn to the company director. "Can I not have an assistant?" And the old man nearly choked. "You already agreed, it's a signed contract, Bennett, and we paid the agency," and I had no choice but to nod. While Daniel just looked mildly amused. "What's your name?" I asked coolly, pretending not to know him, and he raised an eyebrow. "Daniel, but you can call me Shao Carter, if that makes you feel better." And I rolled my eyes. "Fine then, Daniel. Please take these props backstage," and he picked them up without complaint, grinning like a kid who got exactly what he wanted. And in that moment, I realized something wasn't trying to be Daniel Carter, the CEO, anymore. He was trying to be the Daniel who loved me, even if I didn't want him, even if it was too late. And for the first time, I wasn't angry, I was just curious, because love might be over, but sometimes people still deserve to grow beside you, even if they're a few years too late. From the moment Daniel Carter officially became my assistant, everything about my daily routine turned upside down in the most unsettling, ironic, and absurdly poetic way. Because the same man who once stood above me as the most powerful CEO I'd ever met was now carrying my rehearsal props, holding umbrellas over my head when it rained, and adjusting my shoelaces before every performance like some kind of overqualified butler with heartbreak in his eyes. And what made it even worse, or maybe better, was how flawlessly he adapted, how effortlessly he transformed from the cold, untouchable executive I once worshipped to the quiet, reliable Shao Carter that everyone in the troupe started to adore, including the old director who kept saying, "Miss Bennett, your assistant is more punctual than you are." And I just roll my eyes and mutter under my breath, "Of course he is. He used to run empires." But the truth was, it messed with me more than I wanted to admit, because having him Around every day, so close yet so impossibly far, was like picking at a scab I thought had already healed, and no matter how much I tried to keep things professional, tossing him tasks like, get this to wardrobe, or go check the lighting rig, he followed every instruction with a quiet, yes, Miss Bennet, that made my stomach twist in a way that wasn't entirely rage or sadness. It was something between nostalgia and something dangerously close to longing, but I refused to let it show, not even once, not even when he brought me warm lemon water when my throat was sore before a performance, not even when he bought me that exact brand of blister pads I used to keep hidden in my old office drawer. Not even when he stopped mid-rehearsal to tie the fraying ribbon on my ballet shoes without a word and just walked away like it was nothing, because deep down I knew he was trying to earn something back that was already gone. Trying to love me in all the ways he never did before, but I was different now. I wasn't the naive girl who used to memorize his calendar better than my own, who used to smile like an idiot when he'd ask me to accompany him on a business trip, thinking that maybe this time he'd see me as more than just convenient. No. Now I was Claire Bennett, lead choreographer of the regional dance company, rising star in my own right, a woman who had bled and built herself back up from nothing, and I wasn't going to fall for the same man twice, no matter how changed he claimed to be. Still, something in me shifted the day he showed up to rehearsal early with 2 coffees, mine exactly how I liked it, down to the almond milk and extra cinnamon, and said nothing. Just placed it next to me before taking his usual spot near the tech booth, and when I looked up, he was already staring at the stage, pretending to study the lighting, but I knew he remembered. And that was when I realized the scariest part wasn't that he still loved me, it was that part of me still remembered how to love him too, but I shoved the feeling down like I'd done 100 times before and threw myself into our upcoming show, Phoenix Rising, a piece about rebirth, transformation, letting go and God. The irony was not lost on me as I danced those themes every single day while the man who once broke me watched from the shadows, always present, never demanding, just there, quiet and constant like regret personified, and then one afternoon after rehearsal, I called him out. For the first time, invited him to a nearby cafe, which made him blink in surprise like he'd just won the lottery. And I could tell he spent way too long picking his outfit because he looked unnecessarily good in a button-down and jeans, like he was trying to look casual and failing spectacularly. And when we sat down, he grinned and asked if I was in a good mood. But I shook my head and said plainly, not really, I am flying out tomorrow for an exchange program overseas, and the way his smile froze midair made something in me clench, because for once, I had the upper hand, for once, I was the one leaving, and he couldn't do anything about it. Why? He asked softly, almost afraid of the answer, and I just stirred my coffee and said, because I don't like having you around. Mayo distract me, and the silence between us thickened like fog, but he didn't argue, didn't beg. He just nodded like he understood and stared at the table like it held all the answers he'd never figured out. And I watched him, quietly, wondering if this was how he felt all those years I stood beside him, invisible in plain sight, and then he whispered, when you were my secretary, I never felt bothered having you around, and that's when it hit me. Like a piano dropped from a rooftop, had liked me all along, maybe not consciously, maybe not in the way I wanted, but I had meant something to him, and it wasn't enough, not back then, not when it counted, and now he was here, across from me, finally, willing to give me the love I had begged for silently for 7 years, and all I could feel was a tired kind of ache, not the fireworks I once imagined, not the sweeping fairy tale confession. Just this dull sadness that we had ruined something that could have been beautiful, that timing had destroyed everything before it ever had a chance to bloom, and when he looked up and met my eyes, I almost cried, because for the first time, Daniel Carter looked afraid. Really afraid, the kind of fear that only comes when a man realizes the woman he took for granted doesn't belong to him anymore, and he opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, maybe I love you, maybe please don't go, but I beat him to it. I stood up, slung my bag over my shoulder, and said, don't wait for me, and then I left, just like that, because some stories don't get a second chapter, some hearts don't rewind, and my mind had already moved on. The flight overseas was long, but not nearly as heavy as I expected it to feel. I stared out the plane window with headphones in, and silence wrapped around me like a long-awaited hug, and for the first time in what felt like forever, my mind wasn't consumed by Daniel Carter or what I might be leaving behind. Instead, it was full of movement, choreography, blank canvases, warm studio lights, and this rare and precious space I had carved out for myself where no one knew me as someone's secretary, someone's almost wife, or someone's regret, just Claire Bennett, dancer, artist, woman who finally remembered how to breathe. And the moment I landed in Paris and stepped into the quiet courtyard of the conservatory where I'd be living and working for the next 6 months, I exhaled so deeply it almost knocked me over, because this was this choice, this life, this freedom, and I intended to protect it at all costs. I threw myself into my work, rehearsing 8 hours a day, painting in the evenings, sitting at cafes with strangers who didn't ask about my past, who didn't know about the empire I once belonged to or the man who once made me forget my name, and it felt like shedding skin. Like stepping out of an old version of myself and stretching in new light. Of course there were moments when I opened my phone out of habit and almost typed his number, when I heard a low voice in the distance and turned instinctively expecting it to be him. But the longer I stayed away, the quieter those instincts became, until they were whispers instead of screams, echoes instead of ghosts. And one night, as I walked home beneath the Parisian sky with a baguette under one arm and paint-stained fingers, I realized I hadn't thought about him in over a week, and instead of feeling guilty, I smiled, because that was progress, and I deserved it. Life flowed, softly and fully, and I started performing again, small stages at first, then larger ones as the city fell a little in love with me, and I let it. I let the crowd cheer and the lights warm my skin. I let myself take up space without apologizing for it, and then, 2 months into my stay, I got the email, short, clinical, from the Carter Group's HR department. Mr. Daniel Carter has stepped down from his role as CEO effective immediately, and I froze, reading it twice, then 3 times, my pulse quickening for reasons I didn't want to acknowledge. He had finally done it, the thing he once said he never could. He had let it all go, and the world was already reacting. Articles, rumors, speculation, but all I could think about was him standing in that stairwell, whispering he'd give it all up for me, and the terrifying thought that maybe he really meant it. I closed the laptop and walked out into the street, needing air, needing motion, needing to remind myself that I had left for a reason, that love, real love, wasn't supposed to feel like chains wrapped in velvet, but like wind, like laughter, like dancing barefoot at midnight. And just when I was starting to convince myself again that I had made the right choice, I found him outside the conservatory, standing under the fading glow of a street lamp, hands in his pockets, eyes weary, suitcase at his feet, like some poetic cliché I didn't ask for, like fate making one final joke. I didn't speak at first, I just stared at him, and he stared back, neither of us moving, like the entire world had paused to let us decide what happened next. And finally he stepped forward, voice low and cracked, "Hi," and I hated that the sound still made my heart stumble. "How did you find me?" I asked quietly, and he smiled, sad and small. "Your grandmother told me you were in Paris. She also told me to stop ruining your life." And I nearly laughed, because of course she did. "So, what are you doing here?" I asked, arms crossed, guard fully up, and he took a deep breath. "I left it all. Claire, the board, the legacy, the money. It means nothing if you're not in it." And I wanted to yell, to say too little too late, to remind him that I was done, that I didn't want his apologies or his broken promises or his grand gestures, but then he said something that stopped me cold. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want to be near you, even if I'm just clapping in the audience while you dance." And for the first time, I saw him, not the CEO, not the heir, not the man who used to hold my schedule like a shield, but just a man, standing in front of me with nothing but honesty, no plan, no angle, just hope. And maybe it was the streetlight or the exhaustion, or the stupid romantic city we were standing in, but something in me softened, not enough to take him back, but enough to let him stay, for now. So I nodded slowly, "There's a spare room in the building, don't make me regret this," and he smiled, wider than I'd seen in years, and just whispered, "I won't." And for the next few weeks, he kept his word. He stayed in the background, quiet and kind, attending every performance without fail, always in the back row, always clapping like his life depended on it. Never once pushing, never once demanding, just being there. And one night, after the final curtain dropped on our biggest performance yet, I came backstage, still breathless from the applause, and found a note taped to the mirror with a single line, "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," and no name. But I knew, I always knew, and I smiled, not because I was in love again, but because I wasn't angry anymore, and that was enough. Some days he would wait outside with coffee, and I'd take it without a word. Some nights we'd walk side by side through the cobbled streets, talking about nothing and everything, and it felt peaceful, not romantic, not dramatic, just human, and maybe that's what we always needed to be, not epic or tragic, just two people who had hurt each other and still chose to be kind. And when my exchange program ended, and I packed up my things, unsure where I'd go next, he looked at me and said, "You don't owe me anything. But if you ever want to stay, I'll be wherever you are." And I believed him, not because he was perfect, but because he finally stopped pretending to be. And as I boarded the train to Lyon to join a new contemporary troupe, I saw him on the platform, waving quietly, a duffel bag over his shoulder. No expectations in his eyes, just patience, just presence, and maybe I wouldn't fall in love with him again, but maybe I'd learn to love differently, with open hands instead of clenched fists, with truth instead of timing. With the understanding that real love isn't always about getting what you want. Sometimes it's just being willing to stand beside someone and let them grow, even if it means letting go. And as the train pulled away and he grew smaller in the distance, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, not a goodbye, not a promise, just a quiet, simple truth: I am enough.